when I left my first duty station, I went to advanced training as an electrician in Virginia, because I didn't want to be doing such a rescue or all my full years. So went to Virginia, made rate as an electrician's mate, and then just the way luck of the draw, man, I was sent back to Michigan about a few hours north of where I was at before. It's just the way where it goes. So I was still really healthy and no health issues. So when I discharged, I ended up having my last duty station in Galveston, which is about 2.5, 3 hours north of where I grew up in Victoria, which is cool.
Yeah.
I had just gotten out July of 2006, and I was trying to do the whole go to school and full time and work full time.
Right.
At the same time, trying to drive hour and a half to get to the beach to surf when I could. And things were pretty busy. And then I had an opportunity to plant a church with some other pastors in Tallahassee, Florida, as being a college pastor, basically. So it was something I was praying about and thinking about for a while. So I drove to the East Coast and met up with those pastors. I spent about a week and a half there, just making connections and seeing how this would all play out, and asking for God to kind of give me direction of this. I was still unsure, through all that, because it was a really big move,
Yeah, right, of course.
And I was still single, I was 23 years old at that point and stuff, so I didn't have a lot hold me down or hold me back.
Yeah.
So my thoughts were like, well, I'll go to Florida. If it doesn't really work out, I can always come back home,
Right.
So I was actually at a surf contest. It was a June 3rd. I did that in Galveston. And then I drove home that night back to Victoria. I was working with my dad at that point. He owns the industrial shop, rebuilding gensets for the oil field. And it was a Monday morning, June 4th, and I kind of let him know, hey, I think I'm going to take that position to move to Florida the next week,
Right.
He was on board about that, and I was like, okay. So, we're working like a normal day, we thought, and it was about 8:30, 8:45. I mean, it was an early morning. I just got to the shop, and to make it kind of a shorter story, I got on top of a 10-foot ladder, and my dad's got these racks with all kinds of oil field parts, all stacked up. And those racks are stacked up to about 12 foot. So he got on top of the rack. If you can envision it, it's kind of hard to explain, but he got on top of the rack and he was going to lower this exhaust manifold. It looks basically like a big, huge steel pipe, basically.
Yeah.
So he was going to lower it down from that rack, and lower it down onto this wind-up dolly. There's forks. You wind it up and then you put the weight on top of the forks and you lower it down. Well. It basically, to make it a shorter story, he kind of pushed it towards me and I pulled it towards me, and the exhaust manifold basically rolled forward really quickly. It was so heavy, pushed me off the ladder.
Okay. Oh wow.
All of a sudden, I'm sideways in the air, looking down at the shop floor, and
Do you remember how tall of a ladder you were on?
Yeah. So I was on top of the top rung of a 10-foot ladder.
Okay.
So I was, and I'm 6'2", standing up on top of that thing.
Yeah.
So when that pipe came down, or that exhaust manifold came down, it came down with me. And it hit the ladder and pushed me sideways in the air. So I'm falling sideways in the air. I'm looking down, and I see all these engine parts on the floor, and the last thing is like, I'm thinking, oh man, this is gonna suck.
Yeah.
And
you remember thinking that?
Yeah, I remember falling sideways in there, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna suck, man.
Yeah.
And I ended up on top sideways. I fell sideways in the air, and my head went straight on top of that steel exhaust manifold that shattered my skull.
Wow.
So I tried to brace my fall, obviously, when I fell sideways, and catch myself with my left wrist. It just, when it hit the ground, my left wrist just shattered and folded backwards. So, and the skull took the blunt of it, you know. So it was, traumatic day.
Just So do you, like, I kind of can remember the ambulance ride and stuff like that. So do you remember any of that, or is that your last memory?
Actually, I remember, let's see, my dad, what I do remember is that my dad didn't wait for the ambulance.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I do remember is he helped me, you know, get into his truck.
Okay.
Because he didn't, I had a cap on at work, not like a helmet, but like a normal hat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so when I fell, it was all internal. It shattered my skull, but it didn't break my scalp. So I was dying, but my dad didn't know it.
Yeah.
He actually took me in because he saw my wrist that was folded backwards.
Yeah. And that's what he thought was the extent of your injuries, or?
Yeah, that's what he thought. But at the same time, I was talking all garbled, you know, and but we didn't know anything about brain damage, you know.
Yeah,
so,
sure. Well, it's not something that you learn in school or anything like that. Like, I think you have to go through it to really know what it's all about.
Oh, totally. I mean, there's just so much that we know, so much that we don't know about the brain. It's unreal.
Yeah.
You know. So, I don't. You know, I remember him getting me to the hospital. I was kind of in and out, blacking out, and I was sitting in a wheelchair for a minute. My mom showed up, and last thing I kind of remember, she was talking to me, and I trying to talk to me, and I couldn't talk, and I passed out onto the floor at the hospital, and then that's when the trauma doctor had walked by and said, and he's got to have more.
So
than just
you were just sitting
injury.
in like general.
Just waiting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my
God. The
God.
waiting room, dying for a couple minutes, but nobody knew it, you know?
Oh, geez.
And I'm sure you couldn't really talk, so you didn't really have any way to communicate.
To tell everybody, they're like, hey, I'm dying. It's not just my wrist.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody had a clue, and obviously I was not aware enough, conscious enough to know what was happening. I was trying to talk, but everything was, like I said, was just garbled mess.
Yeah, sure. Well, what's crazy is that you remember some of this, because it seems, and we've talked to a lot of people with TBIs and on this podcast, and including Shane, and most people haven't given us this much detail. They usually, someone else fills in all the detail. Like, I'm impressed that you actually remembered some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And yet it was still that bad. Like, oh, dude, it's crazy. But then it also shows you, just like you said, we don't have a clue, like, really about the brain and everything about the brain. And every single one of these is just different.
Yeah. And that's the other thing.
Right.
Like, all traumatic brain injuries, like the people we've talked to, they have different symptoms and different.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, every recovery is going to be different too, you know?
For sure.
You could have the exact same brain injury on the same part of the brain, but have a completely different recovery.
Yep. Agreed.
It was good listening to your podcast, Shane. I mean, I think that y'all touched on neuroplasticity and stuff. And a lot of people don't talk about that. I go to the brain injury conferences and speak sometimes, and that's something that's always been real key for me is try new things, try to work it. You know, even you know it sucks, you know, and you can't remember it. Try to work it, you know, like a muscle, you know.
Yeah.
Yep. And so you told us that you were in a 6-week coma.
Wow.
After your brain injury, and like, tell us. Well, do you remember any dreams or anything like that? Because when I was in a coma, I had some crazy ass dreams.
And he also said he remembered, like, you know, what people the nurses talking about what they got for Christmas and stuff like that. So like, they're like, he's out cold, but he's still listening.
It's you know, the brain has its own self, its own like safety mechanism. So it's you're trying, it's like you're trying to piece it together in your head. You're halfway awake, but at the same time, your brain's shutting down because it's personally trying to protect itself.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's so strange, and like I remember right before I went into surgery. There's so much to it, guys. I mean, it was a small hospital, small town. There was not a neurosurgeon on call for over 2 months, and he just happened to show up that morning. You know what I mean?
That's fate or whatever.
Unreal, man.
Yeah.
They were gonna send me to a bigger hospital. They said I wouldn't have made it within 10 minutes, so they did the emergency surgery, and I remember looking at the trauma doctor right before I went out completely, and he's looking at me. He's saying, Mr. Lytle, try to stay awake as long as you can. And I just remember, okay, I guess this is it, man. Like bright lights. I guess I'm going home. You know what I mean?
So, you said also that you were told. I don't know if the doctor actually told you this or your parents, but you said you heard that you wouldn't survive the emergency surgery.
Yes, and that's why it resonated so much when I listened to your podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's rare to have this kind of connection.
For sure.
I'm so blessed that that you've come so far, man. It's encouraging for me, bro.
Yeah.
So
I still have a long way to go, but I'm gonna get there.
Yeah, you're an encouragement, man. Every day, you guys, y'all are an awesome team, man.
Yeah.
And I praise God. There's people like y'all are out there that are just, hey, man, we're not doing it just for yourself, but you're encouraging so many other people.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Yep.
Yeah, and that was the thing for me. Like when I woke up, I don't want to fast forward too much, but when I woke up, I my goal was that to relearn how to walk, talk, read, or write, swallow. But my thing was like, how can I use this to help encourage others? And I didn't know anybody in a small town like Victoria that had a brain injury. So yeah, I said, okay, let's how do I use this? And so over time, I've been able to connect with other people that, man, we've got so much similarities, and it's just so helpful for me. And I do remember, like you were talking about, Shane, the doctor was talking about, were you told a certain, was there a certain time or where the doctor said you shouldn't survive this or that? And yeah, I was told the exact same thing. They said I wouldn't live. They said I wouldn't survive the emergency surgery first.
Yeah.
And then they said, they came out and they said, he made it through the surgery, but I don't see if there's any way he could survive another night.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was still touch and go after you made it through the surgery.
Right. I was not even somewhat stable until about 2.5 to 3 weeks into the coma, because I didn't know this until years later because I couldn't process the magnitude of the injury itself.
Sure.
But when I met with the trauma doctor and the neurosurgeon, they explained to me and they gave me the mold of my head that I get. They said it wasn't just the brain injury, wasn't just the skull removal. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the reason we removed the parts of your skull is because it was thousands of bone fragments embedded into your brain. And
wow.
And the reason because of that, the way you fell,
and you had a helmet on.
No, I didn't have a helmet. I just had a normal ball cap on.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but when they explained to me, it wasn't just the removal of my skull, and the brain injury itself. It was that I had when I fell, it basically torqued my spinal cord, and I had a midline shift. Usually, you have a line that goes kind of straight across your brain.
Yeah.
Well, when I fell, the blunt trauma was so deep that it torqued my spinal cord where it looked like a question mark instead of a